This is presidential candidate Deon D. Jenkins, the only black agenda priority candidate, the only candidate that has a legitimate reparations package entitled DMLG, Defense Money Land Grants, acknowledging the four elements of reparations, acknowledging the four elements of American society, which is defensive structure, capital, land, and access to capital. And I established a reparations package based on the four elements of American society. This is the third video of my ADOS is not a Lineage claim series. And I talked about in the first two videos how we have to acknowledge the fact that the ADOS acronym and the classification of ADOS, which stands for American Descendants of Slavery, is not a specific lineage claim. And I talked about that, and I talked about how the specific lineage claim should be blacks who descended from American slaves. And I talked about that in great detail. So if you're late to the party, go check out the first two videos and then check this one out. So you could really have a grounding of what I'm talking about. And I want to make it very clear, this is not a diss video to the ADOS movement. This is only intellectual, respectful, constructive criticism in the attempt to try to make it stronger. All right. However, I talked about how specifying a lineage claim is very important. And it leads into what I'm about to talk about, because I think it's a problem and a huge fallacy that because we do not have a specific lineage claim in the ADOS movement, and I talked about that, how ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, does not specify what type of American and what type of slavery, because the culture of the movement isn't grounded in specifications. Then it's leaving the room open, and is leaving the door open for outside groups to manipulate and exploit any resources that will get passed down for our lineage group. All right. And we must acknowledge that, and we must try to change that. And it also leaves the door open for politicians to exploit our movement as well in order to catapult their own political careers. And I'm going to talk about that right now. You see, one thing I'm noticing is that every time there's a candidate or politician who gets in front of a camera that have a large access to the American people, it seems as if every time a candidate talks about a black agenda, specifically those who classified as white, a lot of people in the ADOS movement gets elated by that. And that's a huge discrepancy, because your movement isn't grounded in black Americans who descended from American slaves, which specifies black people in this country, that specifies a specific group. Okay? Because we did not specify that using the acronym ADOS, which I showed you in the other videos, how a white American can take that because it doesn't specify which type of American and which type of slavery. And I'm not going to get into that, but in other groups who are American, who are born in America, who comes from slavery. And I talked about how there are different types of slavery, right? In other parts of the world. Because we don't specify that, we are allowing other groups to catapult take advantage of that. And that's a huge problem. We have so many of these ADOS people who do not understand how important it is to have your own candidates. The reason why we had so many white candidates, so many white politicians, so many white presidents, just think about it. We had 43 presidents who were white men before Barack Obama. We've never had a president who's a black descendant of American slaves. Not one time. Just think about that for a minute. The reason why you've never seen that is because white Americans understood how important it was for them in order to establish a white supremacist society. They had to make sure that their candidates and their presidents and their politicians represented them. They had to be white. Because by making sure that your politicians and leaders stay white, there is a more chance that the policies and the infrastructure and the laws are going to reflect and benefit white people. So that was deliberate. If you notice, if you go around the world and if you look at world history and study the leaders and politicians and the people who were placed in power by the people, most of these people have a certain invested interest and a lineage claim to the people who elected them and put them in power. It's a reason for that. See, there's a difference between a Tom Steyer who comes out of nowhere talking about he have a black agenda because he's trying to get your vote. A white man. There's a difference between him and a person like myself who was talking about a black agenda when the leaders of the ADOS movement was endorsing Bernie Sanders. There's a big difference between getting behind a Tom Steyer who benefits off of white supremacy, who understands that there is pressure now because of the ground movements that are going on and because of presidential candidates like myself, making sure that guys like myself stay neutralized. There is invested interest in making sure that white supremacy stay there. A guy like Tom Steyer and Marianne Williamson, they benefit off of white supremacy. There is an invested interest to make sure that that stays, but they need to get your vote. And they can't get in the White House without your vote. And they understand that, so they're going to tell you that they have a black agenda. See, we have to understand the fallacies in this as a people, because your reparations is a birthright. Your lineage claim is a birthright. Whoever you elect in that White House is going to be in charge of your birthright. You have a thumbprint in American society, arguably the richest nation in the world, arguably the most powerful nation in the world. You have a birthright to that. See, a lot of the ADOS people don't understand that. They don't value their birthright. That's why they don't want to see black in their acronym. That's the real reason why you don't see black in the acronym ADOS, because you don't value your birthright. You're not just an American, you're a black American. When you say that you are a black who descended from American slaves, you acknowledge that you are a specific group of black people in America. You just can't be a white person who have a great grandmother who is black. Because now I can say as a white person, I'm an American, and because my grandmother is black, who descended from slaves in America, I am an American who descended from slaves. No, I'm not a black American, but I descended from slaves. I can't be a Brazilian who was born in America, who could trace my lineage back to Brazilian slavery and say, well, look, I'm ADOS because I was born in America and I'm a descendant of slavery. It's not American slavery, but it's slavery. I can't do that. See, when you say that you are a black who descended from American slaves, that specify your lineage claim as a black American. And because a lot of people in the ADOS movement don't understand that and don't value that, it is the reason why they get so elated when they see Tom Steyer, because the truth of the matter is, can we be honest? So many of our people have Stockholm Syndrome. We just want white validation. And our yearning to get white validation is so strong that we are willing to jeopardize our birthright in order to get it. And that's something that we have to understand. That is something that we have to acknowledge as a people. You got to ask yourself, how come I get so elated when white people acknowledge me? Why do I need white people to acknowledge me so much? Why don't I want to get behind a candidate like DeonDJenkins, who have a legitimate reparations package, who acknowledge reparations by its 4 elements, who've been doing this when nobody was talking about reparations, who understood why it was important to have a black agenda priority candidate before anybody else did. Even the leaders of ADOS didn't even understand it at that time. It might change, they might grow, but at that time, they were talking about Bernie Sanders. One of them, I'm not going to mention this person's name, but one of them was talking about Bernie Sanders, gave an endorsement for Bernie Sanders. And this person will admit that if you ask this person. See, when leadership of the ADOS movement was validating and endorsing Bernie Sanders, I was running for president, talking to the media about reparations for our people. I was calling Bernie Sanders out back in 2015. I'm on record for calling Bernie Sanders out. That was the first time, way back in 2015. Why wouldn't you want to get behind a candidate like that? The reason why you don't want to get behind a candidate like that is because you seek white validation. And that's going to be the cost of your birthright. See, the reason why a lot of you guys didn't hear about me in 2015 and you're just now hearing about me now is because, unfortunately, a lot of our people do not value their birthright. Because if they valued their birthright, they will understand that they have to research their own candidates. The reason why you're not researching your own candidates is because you don't value that. You don't value making sure that you have representation in American politics, because American politics is the grouping of legislatures with the power to influence American government. And you don't value that. Because if you valued that, you would research candidates. You would take the time to research candidates. Why do we have to have this lazy approach of waiting until the television put a candidate in front of us? We don't want to do any reading, any research. You could Google search my name, Deon D. Jenkins. You would see that this is legitimate. But so many of our people don't want to do what it takes to make sure that we acquire our birthright. So many of our people are comfortable with just complaining about the symptoms of racism. Nobody want to take the effort to make sure that we have representation to change it. See, when you understand that this is your birthright, and you're only going to get one shot at this, whoever you elect into that White House is going to be in charge of your birthright. Once you understand that, you are going to do the research that's needed in order to make sure that you have the right candidate representing you in American politics. Once you understand that this is your birthright, you are going to take the time out of your day to make sure that you do not give support to outside groups, particularly outside groups in American politics who have an invested interest in your oppression. Supporting outside groups in American politics in your representation is counterintuitive to everything that you got going on. But you don't understand that. See, everybody else do understand that, but you don't. That's a problem. That's a serious fallacy in your political structure. The reason why you didn't hear about me in 2015, because nobody cared about a black agenda in 2015. I mean, can we be real? Nobody cared about a black agenda in 2015. You had people back then doing either one of the extremes. Either they didn't vote at all, and they wasn't going to do any research. They wasn't going to find out if there were any candidates in their area who had a black agenda. If there is a presidential candidate that was running who had a black agenda, or they were just voting for the Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton. You had two extremes going on back then, but you had a guy like myself who told the American political structure that we deserved and was owed our birthright, which was reparations. You didn't have anybody talking like that back in 2015 in American politics, keeping reparations at the forefront of their campaign. But I did that. So what you have to understand is that it is important that you have candidates who represent your interest, your lineage, your background, your history in this nation. And the reason why a lot of you ADOS people are so elated when guys like Tom Steyer's come aboard is because you don't have any grounding of who you are. You are a black who descended from American slaves. But because you think you are ADOS, American descendant of slavery, you don't understand that don't represent you. That represents a whole lot of other people as well. And a lot of you guys are comfortable with that. Now, there are some people who genuinely genuinely do not understand that do not represent them specifically. But then you have a group of people who's going to hear this and they're going to know I'm telling the truth, and they are going to continue with the ADOS thing. And the reason why they are going to continue with the ADOS thing is because they don't want to specify as Black American. They're trying to get away from being Black American. Let's be real, folks. Let's be real. You want to get lumped up with other groups. You are a black who descended from American slaves. That's a specific lineage claim to your birthright. And I'm going to end on this. There's a famous story in the Bible. The son of Isaac, Jacob, who had a brother named Esau. Esau was the oldest, Jacob was the youngest. They were twin brothers. In Hebrew culture, the father passes on his inheritance. The father passes down his heritage to the oldest son. And because Esau was the oldest son, he had a claim of a heritage that was going to be passed down to him, a legacy and an inheritance. Jacob did not like this because he was the youngest son. Of course, he wanted that. But he realized something. He realized that Esau really did not value his birthright. And he realized that Esau was a very shallow type of guy. He lived on the moment, and instant gratification sufficed him dearly. So what he did was he said, okay, look, I'm going to trick this man from his birthright. So what he did, he knew that Esau was a hunter, and he knew that he was a hard-working hunter. And after Esau would go out to hunt, he would come back home hungry. So he schemed up a plan in order to trick Esau out of his birthright. He started cooking food. He cooked a special stew. And this stew had a very nice aroma. So when Esau came home one night after a long night of hunting, he was hungry. So because he was hungry, he asked Jacob for some of the stew. But Jacob told him, no, I'm not going to give you any of the stew until you give me your birthright. You can eat as much as you want if you give me your birthright. Being the shallow guy that Esau was and not really valuing his birthright, he made the deal. He sold his birthright for a bowl of stew. That decision will later haunt him so much that he will try to kill Jacob later on after he realized the damage that was done. The blessings of his father will get passed down, and history will show that Jacob, whose name will get changed to Israel, will become the father of a very prosperous nation. I say that to tell you to protect your birthright with everything you have. This is your lineage. This is your claim. You are a group of people who have a heritage that nobody in the world have. You are a group of people who have a birthright that nobody in the world have. Honor that. Protect that. This is Deon D. Jenkins, presidential candidate Deon D. Jenkins. I will do a reparations broadcast on my very next broadcast. So stay tuned, because I'm going to tell you the specifications of DMLG. This is Deon D. Jenkins running for president of the United States of America, and I approve this message. And hopefully I become president. I'm out.